This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Joe Di Prisco is an acclaimed author of prize-winning poetry, bestselling memoirs, nonfiction books, and novels. He taught for many years and has served as chair of not-for-profits dedicated to the arts, theater, children's mental health, and schools. He joins me today on Uncorking a Story to discuss his career and latest collection of poetry entitled My Last Resume. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Joe.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here, Joe, and I'm curious, where does your story as a writer begin?
Well, it was a miserable childhood, isn't it? That's usually works for a lot of writers. No writer said, "Oh, I had such a happy childhood. I think I'll write a poem." That doesn't happen. For me, it began with the church. I grew up in Brooklyn, in Greenpoint, which now Greenpoint, not a big deal. So when I was growing up, Greenpoint was Polish bakeries and abandoned factories and the mob, Italian mob, which is my family. So my family has intersections in all those areas. So I got everything I needed, I thought at the time, from the church. A little boy walking down the street, block away is the church. And so I got what I needed about story, and about music, and about art, and about philosophy, and about religion. And that was great. We didn't have any books in my home. I'm the only person in my family to graduate from high school. I was the black sheep. And one of the good things about having no books in your home is that you get to find stuff out on your own. And you're not circumscribed in what's the appropriate thing to read and what's the inappropriate thing to read. So it was a home free. Now for me, my family, my dad was a small-time mobster in Brooklyn, bookmaker, and that's how we got to California, because he was on the run from the FBI and the New York City Police Department. He's working with involved with a lot of dirty cops, and a lot of stories I tell in my two memoirs, Subway to California, sort of the image, taking the subway to California. Because we were on the run when I was 10 years old. He took off. We were walking down a road in Long Island where my Italian grandparents had a farm. Now it's all built up. Back then it was a farm, chickens, a donkey, pigs, rabbits, corn, fields of corn and watermelon. It was just fantastic. It was just fantastic. So walking down the road with my dad, my little brother, and he turns to me, I'm 10 years old, he says, "Go back to grandma's house. Don't take no from anybody." I look down the road, the house is surrounded by police cars. And that's when I said, something's going on here that I need to remember. And that's when the odyssey began to California, the subway to California. His street name was Pope. I tried to find out, why do they call you Pope? Sometimes they call you Popey. Why do they do that? He would never give me a straight answer. And my mother had an X-rated answer for it. Most of her answers were X-rated. And she said, Well, it's something to do. I think he told me one time something like this. Yeah, one time they saw me coming out of a church, my crew. I never saw him in a church. So he was very suspicious. I mean, I was one of those kids who asked too many questions. So his stock response to me was, "What are you writing, a book?" Actually, it's a very good imitation of my father, whose birthday he would be 99 years old today, actually. So that was the start, and I guess I was writing a book. I didn't know it at the time, but there you go. I was uncorking a story at 10 years old. That's what I was doing, Mike.
Well, it sounds like you had a lot of seeds planted in your head. I mean, being so close to a farm and all.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. So, but for all this stuff about the church, I was a pious little boy. I ended up joining a monastery when I was a young man. I became Brother Joseph. I sort of left all that behind, although I'm not sure, not quite finished with all that. But for me, writing is about the antithesis of churchification. I hate the churchification of stuff. I think writing should be in the world. It shouldn't have that piety about it. And that's, for me, being a poet, oh my gosh, who hates poet? I was watching The Big Short the other day, and there's a little Chiron there. And the world is falling apart, right? 2007, 2008, and there's a little, the truth is like poetry. And underneath there's a line, everybody hates effing poetry. Okay? I like that. I mean, I resist this whole thing. Well, yeah, poetry is really good. And it changes people's lives. You read a poem, you write a poem. Things don't have to be the same. I mean, I can understand. It's hard to understand, but at the same time, easy to understand why people say they hate poetry, because they're reading bad poems. Like, if someone reads a poem of mine and says, I don't like it, okay, well, maybe I failed. I didn't do the job. And I started writing poetry. I started publishing poetry when I was in college, and my first book came out. I was 24, had a new baby and a new book, and things sort of got derailed after that for me. I was in graduate school at Cal, and my fellowship ran out eventually. Took a job at a restaurant where my brother was the manager. Italian restaurant, of course, a lot of people with a lot of vowels in their names. Sort of like Rhode Island, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I have to ask, I have to pause you here. You mentioned before you were the first of your family to graduate high school and you're the black sheep. Not only
the only person.
The only.
Yeah.
But not only did you graduate high school, obviously followed by undergraduate, then graduate school. How did you? I mean, talk about the black sheep. You're the blackest of the sheeps.
Yeah, it was hard, and but at the same time, I was trying to play both ends against the middle. I got good grades, and I could write, but there was something that made me uneasy about that life, and it never felt comfortable. I mean, I taught a long time, I adjuncted and all that. But so I started to go back to this thing I was talking about. I worked in a restaurant. And it turns out that this restaurant was the home of an international blackjack team, which I didn't know at the time. So I began playing cards. Played cards all around the world. Monte Carlo, the Caribbean, lived in Las Vegas for a while, South Africa. I did pretty well. I didn't do great because I got barred at every casino in the world eventually. It meant I was pretty good, but I wasn't good enough to escape notice. And I found myself in a couple of back rooms that I didn't ever want to return to. But I learned a lot. I traveled the world, made some money, and I think what I'm trying to get at, and this is where I really have a hard time explaining. It was, as much as I wanted to write a poem, I didn't want the straight and narrow. I just never did. But I tried to have it both ways. And that's why I ended up, taking a lot of bad turns. So this book of poems covers 50 years, but there's a 20-year gap in which I didn't write any poems. I had substance problems, polite way to put it, for an impolite series of decisions I made. And but things changed. I made a couple of good choices, and by the time the millennium came around, 2000, I was able to write again. Published a new book of poems, published my first novel, published a book of nonfiction about adolescence. I know you're keen on adolescence, and I'm an example of arrested development. I am an adolescent at heart, finally, and I love that. When I taught college, I taught middle school, I taught high school. High school is the most fun to teach. It's the most intense. So you can teach anything. Anything is possible. And kids wear their emotions on their sleeves. Sometimes they wear them on your sleeves. And so I did a lot of counseling. I ended up in administration. I became a counselor. So that helped me get organized. And then ever since 2000, I've been writing books. And things are going great. Some days. Today wasn't so bad.
Well, you day by day is what they
Right.
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 I was gonna say day by day is what they say, but then I stopped myself and then I said it anyway.
Yeah, no.
Sometimes I can't help myself.
But I noticed in your fiction, when you got an interest in churchy people, a priest, that figures in a couple of novels.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because in my in all but one of the books I've written, there's a scene in a confessional, and it's like a little Easter egg I put in there. And I was, obviously the church has been a part of my life since I was born. My mother would call me every Sunday when I was in college, just to make sure that I had gone or was planning on going to mass.
Okay.
And to this day, the first thing she asks, she doesn't remember what day it is, and she'll always ask my father. She'll be like, "Donnie, what day is today? Is today Saturday? Do we have to go to mass?" Because they're diehard, Saturday evening mass people. Doesn't remember much of anything else, but she will remember that she has to go to mass on Saturday nights. Although we pulled one over on her this weekend. She was hungry, and it's Friday during Lent, not supposed to have meat, according to Catholic tradition. And my father looks at me and says, "Don't tell your mother that it's Friday." But the only thing she would eat were meatballs. So it's either she doesn't eat or she eats meatballs. I'm like, I think we put some calories in the old bird, but
But there's something that draws us, I think, you and me, to that clerical life. And clerical is the wrong word. I mean, my novels have mostly 7 novels I've published. Half of them deal with the mob, and half of them deal with the church. And one of them deals
clearly.
Right, they're both dysfunctional families. So in my latest novel, The Good Family Fitzgerald, this is both. I've got the mob and the church, and it's an Irish American family, but the Italians figure in, as most Irish marry Italians and vice versa. We're both, immigrants to this culture, and so the Italians and the Irish, they're united, divided. And the Irish invented talking. The Italians invented never shutting up. And there's a lot of, so they married this anyway. It's a saga. Some of my novels are very high concept. And one takes place in the afterlife with a brother who has seen too much, and he ends up first scene, he dies. But that's just the beginning of the novel, where it all begins. In fact, we had the book release party. Book did pretty well, actually. Book release party in a mausoleum.
Oh, wow.
Which was a lot of fun. And I had a Grateful Dead band cover. It was a great party. So anyway.
Oh my gosh. That sounds
fun when it is.
Yeah, but you took it one step further in terms of, contemplating religious life at one point, which is something that my mother always wanted me to do, but I never could do it because at 15, my interest in girls was raised, and I never looked back. So the whole celibacy thing was not, I knew it wasn't going to work out for me. Although I've been married for 25 years, and that's part of the gig now. But
Mazel tov, right? I know. So I get that joke. That's a good one. Yeah. I've been married 30 years, 15 of the happiest of my life. That one. Yeah. So the church, it gives you, as we're saying, it's dysfunctional family. And so is with the mob. These are unions. This is a way to make sense of a very complicated world. And there are great stories about the mob, obviously. Not only what's the greatest movie ever made, right? The Godfather.
Of course. And one of the greatest books ever written.
Yeah. It's fun. I love The Sopranos. Well, anyway. But the church story needs to be told. There's still more to be told about what's going on.
Yeah.
Inside the light, because inside, when I lived in a monastery, I lived up in Napa, and picked grapes. Hard work, picking grapes. Very hard work. And being in community. The celibacy issue became an issue for me at some point. Probably sooner than I expected, but as I said, I was a very pious boy. And then I thought, well, something else will work.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone once told me that celibacy is one of the biggest rumors in the Catholic Church. I just don't know how people, I'm sure there are some people who do it. I don't know. To me, it goes against nature, but what do I know?
Yeah.
I'm a practicing Catholic. I'm not necessarily a good Catholic.
Okay. I put myself in that category too. Some of my best friends are priests, I gotta say.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, mine too. I've got a couple I'm very close with, and have a lot of laughs with. But it's a life that I knew wasn't necessarily for me. Although I do get inspired. I do write about it as you so kindly pointed out.
Well, my goodness, your brother writer on this subject. We gotta. You read J.F. Powers? Do you read any of him?
No, I haven't.
He's the great writer of The Clerical Life from Minnesota, and he had a stride in the 60s, won the National Book Award. All his stories are about priests. All of them. Yeah. And they're funny and good.
I'm curious, how did you, obviously your life wasn't necessarily straight and narrow. But how did you escape sort of the life in quotation marks of, like your father's life? Or did you not fully escape it?
Well, as I said, I did deal with a lot of people who, I managed a band, somebody just out of San Quentin, and everybody in the restaurant I was working in was either on their way to prison or just back from prison. And my mother's favorite social event was coming home from prison party or going to prison party. She would love that kind of stuff. She'd make her, Italian cheesecake and always knocked everybody out. So the life, what is it about the life? That's what I like about it. The stakes are high. Playing around the blackjack, high stakes. I was playing, $10,000 a hand, not my money. Sometimes, $100,000 writing on one card. And again, not my money, but I had a backer and he thought I was a good player. So, and I guess I liked that drama and I wanted that to inform whatever I ended up doing. And I was also a good teacher and I was a dedicated teacher. It meant a lot to me, but I took all these, I opened 2 restaurants from the shell. And I love to talk about the mob, and which ended up with a big FBI investigation into this restaurant that we opened. At one point, I was notified that I was the prime suspect in a racketeering investigation. I said, "What is going on here? What did I get into? I gotta go. See you later." Because back in the day, it was pretty, not that I did this, I want to make this really clear, but I mean, restaurants are favorite targets for the feds because, okay, it's easy to launder money. These days, does anybody use cash anymore?
Right.
I don't know what happened. And so, answering your question, it's a serious question, and I write about it at length in both the memoirs about the titillation and the risk. I love the risk, and I guess in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what I like about writing is risk. If you're not taking a risk, if you're not going all in, to use the expression, if you're not going all in, then what the hell are you doing? If it's really not that important to you, it's too hard otherwise. It's too hard to write unless you really want to give it everything. So I think, Mike, you just made me have a little epiphany here. I never put that together till just this instant. That's what it was about. And that's what I like about all my career paths was there was always an element of risk. I love new things. I love I like this not-for-profit I've founded at the University of California, the New Literary Project. Teaching a lot of kids, giving away the Joyce Carol Oates Prize, $50,000 to a mid-career author. It's our 8th prize coming up. Awarding creative writers who teach high school from all around the country. We give them $5,000 summer award so they can write free. And I think we have one from Connecticut this year. We've also done 40 over the years, 3 years. And then we lead these workshops at places like Juvenile Hall, in Contra Costa County, and Girls Inc., and all public high schools, led by creative writers from Cal and more recently from St. Mary's College in California. So we have a big operation. And then we publish a yearly anthology, Some Seistas, where you have kids from prison, kids from Girls Inc., 90% kids of color. And they're in the same book with Joyce Carol Oates and Manuel Munoz and Lauren Groff and Daniel Mason, and everybody in their community. So we try to put it all together. It's a mission to drive social change, unleash artistic power, which is what you're doing too. You're driving social change and unleashing artistic power by talking to writers all the time.
Well, one download at a time.
That's right.
I never thought of it that way. You make it sound a lot more important than I've ever thought about it.
Oh, what you mean to engage people at the level you're doing it? You ask open-ended enough questions that people actually going to decide. Am I going to tell the truth? Yeah, I am going to tell the truth. I am going to answer this question. That's good. Which is also what happens in the class. That's going well. If you ask the right questions. The older I get, the fewer answers I have. But I hope I get some better questions. I was reading, Edward Said, famous critic, was writing about the late style. I mean, I'm not a young man. I know I look it, but I'm not a young man, and writing 50 years. And he's talking about the late style of Beethoven or Shakespeare or somebody else. And he said, "Oh, things have changed. They affirm life. They're reconciled." And he talks about the tempest. And I said, "Yeah, I don't believe it. I'm not reconciled. I'm still difficult. I still look for the difficulty. I'm still miserable about stuff. I'm still never going to be content. I still have questions. I don't have any answers. I hope I have better questions. And I hope I get to answer them before the curtain comes down."
I love the notion of having better questions and answers, because I think that's the true insight is asking the right questions, versus always asking what you think are the right answers.
Well, this goes to the thing I think that people have with poems, or poetry, or poets, is that they think, well, somebody's sort of explaining life. How boring could that be? That's like the most boring activity. I don't want my life. You don't explain stuff to me. You write a poem because it's an experience. And in the course of reading, or course of writing for that matter, what drives you and drives the reader and makes a day change for somebody is the music, is the imagery. And if you're just trying to be abstruse and cute about it, self-important, well, that's boring as heck. I don't believe in that. I think these poems should They should make you laugh, make you cry. They should make you upset in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably like the difference between listening to like a Bob Dylan lyric versus, I don't know, and I'm gonna pick on the genre, but it was one of my favorites, like a hair metal song from the 80s, you know.
Right.
One is gonna have a lot more substance than the other, and I'll let you take a guess at what's got more substance.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. No, well, that's an interesting point. Huh. Well, so Bob Dylan's got a lot of ideas, and the Blonde on Blonde album is pretty good. That's pretty damn good. I'm not so sure about the later religious stuff, but maybe you feel differently. Or Lay Lady Lay, that album, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
We're talking about albums. Albums. I can't believe we talk about albums.
Well, I see a turntable behind you, and you could use the word album.
Well, because I've got an album coming out.
Do you really?
I have a vinyl album coming out of my reading my poetry. So this is, my publisher said, hey, this is let's do a vinyl of your poetry. And I said, do people buy albums? He said, we can't keep them in stock. They just fly out the door. I said, okay, let's do it. So I had to buy a turntable. Listen to some albums. Yeah. And it was fun to do. It's a workout reading your whole book.
I started it. I started it for one of the books, and then I said, no way, I can't do it. You need someone else to produce it. Like I couldn't produce it and read it and edit it. It was just too overwhelming for me. So I subbed it out to a voiceover guy who's much better than I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're talking about poetry though, and other forms of writing. I mean, fiction. Well, you know this. I mean, you're writing a novel. You're like peopling a city. You're opening a business. You got, marketing to do. You got a story to tell. You got sales to do. You got all these pieces to pull together. Now, there are novels that don't do that. Sebald and others. There's lots of Beckett, people who write different kinds of different kind of novels. I don't write those kind of novels, but those novels that have a burden on telling a narrative that makes sense. Well, as I said, it's a bad metaphor, but it's like opening a business. Whereas writing a poem is like shoplifting. It's completely different. Now, a memoir is it's another beast. The memoir is about telling the truth to the extent that you know it. Now, I know we have all this brain research that suggests that we're lying to ourselves, or we're deceiving ourselves, at least into fooling ourselves into thinking that we can remember stuff. I don't know about that. I know that I read great memoirs, and by the way, I think the best parts of most memoirs are usually about childhood. That's when it's freshest. That's when you're seeing things that you never, and to recreate that story. Now, is it all truthful? I can say honestly that every sentence in both memoirs is the truth, except for one sentence where I lie. There's one sentence where I don't tell the truth, and no one would know this sentence except me. But there is one. But everything else is true. Russell Baker said about writing a memoir, nobody's life makes any sense. Just tell a good story. Okay, I could live with that too. Because a memoir is about pain. You don't write. Again, going back to the point, if you can't do it, if you can't really want to do it, then don't do it.
Yeah.
There's so much disappointment and rejection awaiting you. Even acceptance is a form of rejection. Sometimes, this publisher accepted me, but this other one didn't. Then what do you remember? It's like reading student evaluations. I can only remember the bad ones. Now I didn't get too many, but I remember a couple. I said, okay, I'm going to look for that guy.
That's right. Get some revenge. Get some Brooklyn revenge.
Take care of him in a story, and you won't know what hit him.
That's right. Oh boy. What in terms of, contrasting, writing poetry and writing novels, what do you find is more challenging or more rewarding for you?
Well, they're both. I mean, they take place in different parts, I guess, in my brain, myself. One, I mean, a poem, I mean, a novel is, as I was just saying a second ago, it's such a piece of work. It's such a job to do that. But you get a feeling. I mean, I've got a novel that I'm working on in my head that I know that in doubt, but I have a feeling. But when that has to translate into a story. So all the novels begin as kind of an idea and end up and become a story, which is different from an idea. A poem is a feeling, a word. If you don't love words, you're not going to write poetry. It's the language of connection, of metaphor. That's at the bottom of a poem. And it comes from the everyday stuff of our life. Like the title of this book is my 50-year book is My Last Resume. That somebody was doing a piece on me in Brooklyn, writing a feature, an Irish American writer. And he calls me up and says, "My last resume. Are you sick?" I said, "Well, we're all sick, but do I have do I have a condition that I'm checking out?" And I don't know. As far as I know, I don't know. But now a resume, I don't know what you feel about this. I find a resume a really demeaning artifact. Oh, here are my experiences. These are the 3 people who will lie on my behalf, and these are the languages that I think I pretend I can speak. And resume. So, going back to the other stuff about counting cards, playing blackjack. I mean, that's about statistical probability. You're just nonstop calculating that. Okay. Well, poem is kind of like statistical improbability. If you could see the end of a poem when you start writing it, probably it's not going to happen. Whereas for a novel, what Joyce would say is, you got to write the last sentence. I want to know what that last sentence is. And it's funny, in my novels, this has happened more than once. I think I would get to the end of the novel, write the last sentence, and say, "Holy, I have to rewrite this novel." And I would go back all the way to the top of the novel and rewrite the whole thing because I saw something in that last sentence that I never saw before. In one case, it was a first-person narrative. I turned it into a third-person narrative because of something I found out.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. Well, that's what we get paid the big bucks for, right?
Yeah, swimming in the big bucks.
Anyway, but the thing about writing as a career is, and you talked about this so often in so many of your wonderful interviews, that you can't write for yourself. It's kind of do. Otherwise, what are you doing? It's a practical matter. I mean, every writer, especially the first time, okay, I can get published, and that's a great thing. And so you have an agent, and maybe the agent works out, maybe the agent doesn't. But you find out at some point, if you're lucky, you land with a publisher, and this happened twice for me, who's on your side. And you learn that for a publishing house, and this is something I think a lot of writers need to learn, no disrespect, is that publishers don't publish books. They publish authors. And they're got to be in for the long haul for you. So if you find that connection, it's golden. It means the world. You feel at home. Because, writing is a lonely activity. Even with these dogs running around down here at my feet. It's a lonely activity, really.
The actual act of writing absolutely is lonely. Certainly can be. But then the
paradox.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, but then when it comes to publishing, then it becomes a bit more collaborative because you're working with your editor and you're fixing things, and then of course you're going out to promote it and sell it, and you're meeting your readers and prospective readers and all that stuff. But
well, and that's what I was getting at, that there's a paradox involved here, because even if you're writing in isolation, you're in a community of isolated people. I mean, I know very few writers who don't give to the community, who don't sit on boards, who don't give workshops at libraries or at schools, who don't teach. If you stay involved in the world, you have a community that is on your that you can give to and receive from. And that's what New Literary Project's about, creating new communities. And we find that once you do that, boy, it makes all the difference in the world, especially for younger writers. So New Literary Project started in 2015. I'm looking out my backyard here, where we had a party for the English department at Cal, where I was a graduate student, well, long after I had graduated and finished at Cal. And it was a department party, and there was all this interest in creating something new, more outreach into the larger community. And as Cal has a responsibility for that, it's a public university. And proud to be a public university. And there are a lot of poets here, a lot of writers. And next, before I knew it, there was all this conversation about, let's do something. And out of that grew a series of programs. One of the first things we created was a major literary prize, $50,000 for a mid-career author of fiction, now known as the Joyce Carol Oates Prize. Joyce was teaching at Cal at the time. That great writer, great person, great teacher. She and I taught a course together on memoir writing. And so we are coming up on our 8th prize winner in a matter of a few weeks. That's a lot to have accomplished in 8 years, 8 winners. Last year's winner was Manuel Munoz, Lauren Groff before then, Daniel Mason, sort of a murderer's row of terrific writers. And they've become part of our community. Okay, so the project itself is, if I could articulate the mission, it's about driving social change and unleashing artistic power. But it's across generations, and it's across divides. So we have this literary prize. We also teach kids. We've taught hundreds of teenagers at places like Juvenile Hall in Contra Costa County and Girls Inc. in Alameda County, public high schools. And these are taught, these workshops, these creative writing workshops are taught by creative writers from the Cal English department and more recently now from the St. Mary's College of California MFA program. So we have all that going. So we have fellows teaching, we have students learning. And then more recently, we've done something called the Jack Hazard Fellowships, which are $5,000 summer awards for creative writers who are full-time high school educators. And this is just announced our 3rd class. We've given 34 fellowships over the years for these summer awards. Teachers all over the country, from Hawaii to Boston to Florida to LA to Chicago to New York. And this is really we talk about a neglected community, high school authors, professional writers who, if you're teaching high school, and this is near and dear to my heart, having taught high school and trying to write, well, what do? You wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and maybe you can get something done. So summer is really for these writers. This is a great opportunity. And so what we found in the winners we've selected is there's a great need. Teachers who are, have the summer. We have Jack Hazard Fellows whose kids are disabled or who need childcare in the summer. So we're providing something that we're going to be making a documentary about this, actually. It's something we're working on right now, a documentary about the Jack Hazard Fellows. And then the other thing we do is we publish yearly we curate an anthology called Simpsonistas, which contains all project-related authors like Joyce and like Manuel and the other winners of the prize, alongside teachers from Cal and St. Mary's, alongside kids from juvenile hall. And if you're in juvenile hall, it turns out this is a really hot thing. They really want to be in this book. And so we publish their work. We're going to be doing a symphony of, well, I don't know what we're going to call it exactly, but we're going to score their poems to music, working with a local Piedmont East Bay Children's Choir. So we got a lot going on. So we're a 501c3. We're very nimble and small organization. We have a couple of employees. This is my chance to do pro bono work, or Joe Bono work in my case. So I'm the chair, and we're just getting started, and it's 8 years in, and we're growing all the time. Anyway, we feel like we're having an impact. In fact, we know we are.
Yeah, I'm curious, like why does it work, especially like with the at-risk youth, those who are in juvenile hall? What's the connection between like writing, expressing yourself creatively, and sort of overcoming maybe what brought you into juvenile hall in the first place? What's the link? What's the magic, if there is any?
Okay, biggest step, we take a huge step back there. What we're providing at these public school settings too, and juvenile hall and girls' ec, is arts education. That's the broadest rubric, which is totally underfunded. There's very little, if any, arts education going on. So these kids get a chance to work with a professional writer, and they see on the horizon the chance to be published. They exercise, I think, muscles they didn't know they had, but more important, they get an audience. I remember when I got a call from when our first volume, we've now done 6 volumes of Simpsonistas, 5 volumes, working on 6 right now of Simpsonistas. And I got a call from the CEO of Girls Inc., and she's exuberant on the phone. I can't believe my girls are in the same book with Joyce Carol Oates. That is like, okay, it's validation. It's like, okay, you have a voice people can listen to. We're going to give you a forum. And to put yourself in the same book with professional writers is liberating, it's dignifying, and it's a game changer. So yeah, the workshops exist. They're creative writing workshops, and they're there. These are kids these are from neglected, undervalued, overlooked communities. In fact, I would say that's sort of one of the threads of everything we do, of these neglected communities. Mid-career authors of fiction, people who haven't won a Pulitzer or a National Book Award, published a lot, some distinction. And then you have the high school teachers who are creative writers, and then you have these kids in these workshops. These are all neglected communities. And then we can reach out into a broader community. We have great events. We bring into a space where we can all celebrate everything. And we throw great parties. It's one of the fun things of being involved with the project. So I don't know if I answered your question. Did I?
I think you did, and I love this notion of kind of giving somebody in an underserved community or an overlooked community the opportunity to achieve something that they probably never thought was possible, and you're giving them the avenue to do that. There was a guy when I was in college. I had this professor she had a tremendous impact on my life. I was a psych major, and she was a clinical psychologist, which is what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I
can see that.
And I never became one, but that's probably because I haven't grown up yet. So there's still a chance. There's still a chance.
Two people with arrested development issues, you and me. Okay, we got it.
So there's a chance. But she was friendly, and she introduced us to this guy named Dennis James. Now, Dennis James was or is, I don't know if he's still with us, but he was like a Navy pilot or an Air Force pilot, and he would take these at-risk youth into a fighter jet and bring them up into the sky and have them take the controls and give them an opportunity to do something they probably never even dreamed of doing. And the program he was involved with, was shown to sort of, turn these kids' lives around. And I think, you're not bringing somebody up in an F-16 or F-18 or whatever, but it's a similar idea. You're giving somebody the opportunity to do something that's pretty big that they may have never thought was possible.
I think that's really true. And we've seen it. It's the old joke, do you believe in baptism? Believe in it. I've seen it happen. So it's so yeah, we've seen kids come to life when they and the kids from juvenile hall are a perfect example. They come with very rudimentary writing skills, but they come from places of deep hurt and complicated family histories, and they write to that, and their stuff is just astonishing. It's astonishing not only in its candor, but in its literary execution. I mean, I'm a sucker for what happens in the classroom. I think when you teach adolescents, everything can happen. There's nothing you can't teach an adolescent. I don't care. And I've taught public schools, I've taught Catholic schools, I've taught private schools. Everywhere, kids know if you give them a chance, they go there. And you give them the opportunity, you can teach them anything. Sure, they wear their feelings on their sleeve, and they often wear them on your sleeve if you're not careful. So, and I love that. I love the intensity of an adolescent's experience in the classroom. It's great. So, yeah, workshops they're magic. They're just magic, and we've got great fellows who teach from, as I say, from Cal or St. Mary's. They're gifted, and they bring out the best in these kids. It's a great thing.
Well, one of the common things I hear just by talking to authors, and I ask them, where does your story begin? Is usually the first question I ask people, and they say, many of them will say things like, when I was very young, when I was in grammar school, I had a teacher who believed in me. I had a teacher who saw something I wrote and recognized that there was potential there. And just that interaction, that feedback from that, that important person in their life set them on a path to believing that they could grow up one day and become an author. Now, did it happen right away? Absolutely not. So for some of them, it took 40 years, 50 years.
Right. Right.
But it's just that it's giving them a little fuel, giving them a little wind in the sails, at the right time in their life is, it's a gift to be able to do that, but it's also a gift to give somebody.
Couldn't agree more. I've been lucky to have great teachers in my life, and I don't know that we would be talking today if I hadn't had great teachers. And I've always felt at home in the classroom because I've always felt that, well, as I said a second ago, this is where it's all happening. And that validation, that sense of, okay, we're going to read, we're going to learn something, and this is something, okay, I'm going to throw out a word here. I think what happens here with New Literary Project and with writing workshops and teaching in general is there's a sense of awe in the room. Now, I can't quantify what awe is, and I probably can't even define it, but I know it's what the arts are all about. I know when you're reading a great book, you feel awe. You feel, okay, I'm in the presence of something that is beyond me, and I want that. I want to be in that. And if you're ready to go there with kids, or with any writer for that matter, it's golden.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know we can theologize all we want about the concept of awe, and I probably would under the right set of circumstances, but don't you find that that's true? That awe is what it's all about?
Absolutely. It's awe, but it's also part of that is community and being in the right
Yes.
community and having sort of that shared energy together in a space. Um, you're right. Maybe you can't define it, but you can feel it when it's there.
Right.
And that's why I think community is so important to authors. A lot of people think that, oh, this person, they just go off for 6 months or a year or 3 years or whatever it is, and they're in isolation and they write, and then all of a sudden it's done. But that's not really how it works. There's a lot more community involved in it than that, from the little writing group you might meet up with at your coffee shop or at the library to, people in an MFA program to, just chatting with beta readers and your editors. I mean, there is a community around it that you should tap into if you can.
Well, I have 10 things I want to say to that. I hope I can remember some of them. Okay, one, don't you find that when it comes to writers, that, I don't know what your experience is, but my experience is that it's very rare that a writer isn't involved in the larger community. It's just rare.
Yeah.
All these writers, they're doing workshops, they're teaching, they're on boards, whatever. They're doing stuff. They're ramifying in the world. Okay. Two. So writers write in isolation. Yes. Well, I do. I could never write in a cafe. Maybe you can. It's too noisy. I can't deal with it. I can't deal with the presence of all these people. I want them in my dream. But okay, but that's a separate story. But you write in isolation, but you write for a community. Now, you don't write to please other people necessarily, although you might. Although I don't know if I want to defend that too much. But you need to feel like you're part of, that there are readers out there. There are other like-minded souls. That keeps you grounded, keeps you humble, and it keeps you striving for that sense of awe. Three, one reason we give out the Joyce Carol Oates Prize, $50,000, which is not a small amount of change for people, is that, yes, it's for an author, not for a book, and it's to promote work that you're going to do. And we've known from the experience of the people we've given this prize to, it's made a big difference in the next book that they produced. And I'll just cite the example of Daniel Mason, who won our prize in 2020. He just published a magnificent novel, The North Woods, and where he says in the afterword, now this prize made a huge difference in my life, and now North Woods, which is a genius novel, I think it'll win every prize this year coming up, really do. So anyway, so this prize is about continuing the work. It's about expanding your community. Because really, I mean, it's a lonely life being a writer, but it sure is noisy. And in my case, there are a lot of dogs around. They'll be in here in a minute. I'll have to calm them down. So time for a walk, they're thinking. Isn't it the time for the walk already? It's such a nice day outside.
Yeah. My dog wanted nothing to do with the outdoors today. It's been there's a pool in my front yard that was not there this morning.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm used to the East Coast. I kind of miss East Coast weather. I do.
I don't complain. I don't complain. I've been living in the Northeast now, since 1983. I was born in Florida. So
that's right.
I did not love the winters when I first moved up here, but now I'm okay with it. Like, I'm okay with the change of seasons. I find the change of the season something to look forward to, because now by the time summer is over, I'm ready for cooler weather.
Yeah.
I don't love running on ice, because I'm an avid runner, and I don't stop running during the winter, and I don't do a treadmill. So I don't love, like, almost dying
Yeah, right.
for my sport. But I also, look, on the flip side, I went down to visit my parents a few weeks ago. It was 90 degrees and humid in South Florida, and I don't love that either. So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, wherever we live now, we lived in Berkeley for a long time. I told you the story last time how we got to California under questionable circumstances, but So where we live is in a little countrified part of the Bay Area. So we're, it's occasional mountain lion, and there's foxes and coyotes and lots of trees, and there's seasons out here. So it's freezing in the morning and it's 100 degrees during the summer. I kind of like that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. No complaints here. Well, one of the things that we didn't get to do in our first conversation was get to some of my wacky fun questions that I always like to ask my authors. And I'm going to put you in the hot seat for that.
Okay.
And the first one is thinking back to your childhood, your younger years, did you have any favorite TV shows or movies that you kind of gravitated towards? And what might they have been?
So when I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, there was a movie theater right around the 2 blocks away. And it was called the Winthrop Theater. And I could go there, I could walk there. And there were, horror movies. And my favorite movie from then was The Thing by Howard Hawks, 1951. So I saw it much later, but I saw it there in the theater. So this is about the creature that lands from outer space. It's James Arness, and he's a vegetable. So, so he lands in this Arctic region, and these scientists have to deal with him, and it's sort of similar. It's related to what was going on with the invasion of the body snatchers, where in the 50s we're all concerned about the takeovers from outer space or the takeovers from foreign species. And it's what I loved about this movie was not only the scariness of it, but the repartee. I mean, just that snappy patter from the 50s in the Howard Hawks movie. I loved that kind of stuff. I loved The Thing. I loved it.
Yeah, I have to admit, and I'm a movie guy. I never seen it. I'm sure they must have remade it too, because I know they remade.
Yeah,
Body Snatchers.
They did, and apparently it's good, but I'm not interested.
Yeah.
So I have it it's the movie I watch when I've got the flu.
Yeah. For me, I mean, as much as I love to read, I do love a good movie. And I like to, these days, I find myself watching older movies, like movies that I remember growing up with. And same thing with TV shows. Like I was joking with somebody yesterday, and not that it's a joke, because it's really true. I thought that being, an empty nester was going to be, me and my wife having all these adventures because, we couldn't do a lot when the kids were younger. They've been out of the house for 4 years. Our adventures consist of going to bed 9:30, going upstairs, and then watching Columbo or Kojak or Rockford Files comes on every now and then. The big one that we're doing now is Quincy with Jack Klugman. But we watch these old shows and love it. I mean, I'm not complaining here. I'm actually like, I look forward to watching Quincy every night.
So Columbo, are you a Columbo fan?
I've seen every single one, and my wife is. I'm like Nicole, let's watch a Columbo tonight. She's like, we've seen them all, and I'm like, yeah, but if it's one with either Robert Culp or William Shatner, or Louis Jourdan, I'm like, I'm going to watch any of those like real classic ones. Or there was a great one with he was an Irish arms smuggler for the IRA, and he was a poet. He would recite poetry throughout the episode. But but I'll watch Columbo. To me, it's wonderful.
Isn't streaming great? I shouldn't say that. Well, unless it's one of your sponsors, then it's really great.
That's right. This episode is brought to you by Netflix.
I've been watching Suits lately. I've never watched Suits before.
I've never seen it.
Not interested.
My brother, I have a twin brother who's really into it. He's a lawyer, so maybe that explains it. But that's the one with Meghan Markle, right?
Yeah, she's not the hook for me, but
yeah,
everybody else is really fascinating. Okay. All my friends are either therapists or lawyers, so I feel connected.
Yeah. Did you watch the because there's too many, there's many shows about lawyers, not a ton about therapists, but There was the one that was on, I think it was on Apple TV with Jason Segel, Harrison Ford.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
That's fantastic. It is so
Yeah.
well written and
Yeah.
performed. But man, the name of it is escaping me, but I really enjoyed it. Not In Treatment. It was something
I
like
know what you mean. I know where this is bad. This is like, how come I can't remember this title? But it's really good.
it's
I remember that. It's really good.
that's right.
Harrison Ford is really good, and Jason Segel. Yeah, it's really good. Well, what's the thing about therapy? It's actually related to why is it so hard to do a movie about writers? Well, what's so hard about doing a movie? So In Treatment, which I've watched with fascination, thinking, okay, that's a wrong movie he's making. I can see that. And that guy's in a lot of trouble in that marriage. That marriage ain't making it. I can see that. And she's lying. I can see that a mile away. But there's something that you can't. So that documentary style kind of works for therapy, but that doesn't work for writing. Actually, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm going to mention this. Did you ever see the Billy Crystal movie "Throw Mama from the Train"?
Oh, of course, yeah.
That's a pretty good movie about writing. I don't know why, but it's because what goes on, that ordeal, picking a word, or I'm going to rewrite this sentence, or and then I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to put it back in. Okay, well, that's writing. Yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, I'm glad. So my day is spent working on stuff, or actually most of my days with the work project consist of writing emails.
Yeah.
And speaking to prospective stakeholders, as we say, in euphemistically.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, it's watching basketball, watching the Warriors. And yes, I was a Warriors fan when they were in the garbage tank for a long time. I was a season holder when they were not winning 10 games a year. So I don't want to hear anything about being a front runner. That did not happen. Didn't happen.
Well,
anyway, so I'm glad for TV.
Yeah. The only basketball I'm watching now is NCAA, because our UConn Huskies, both men and women, are in their Final Four. So
I know, two monsters.
Two monsters. We've got a tough road ahead. Our women are playing Iowa on Friday. That's a tough one.
Tough.
Paige Beckers versus Caitlin Clark, but
the Steph Curry of women's basketball. My God, she's good.
She's great,
and it's so great that women's basketball has this huge audience now. It's fantastic.
Oh, absolutely, and more power to them. More power to them.
I remember I started when I played hoops a lot, and I would play at Cal, and I remember at some point, I'm pretty old, but I remember, okay, well, now women are in this game. We're playing on the same court, okay. And then she goes past me. Okay, all right, let's try that again. And they turned out to be, wow, this is really educational. I love this. It was a great thing.
Yeah,
it's a great game. Women's basketball is tremendous.
It's great. I couldn't agree more. And I know we talked about movies and TV, but I do spot that turntable behind you. So I have to ask about music. What did you like listening to growing up, and how does that compare to what you listen to now?
I think when I was a kid, it was all Motown, James Brown, that kind of stuff. In middle school, they didn't call it middle school back then. Elementary school and high school, a lot of Motown. Then I don't know. I saw Jimi Hendrix a few times. Saw the Who. Saw Eric Clapton before he was crazy. Yeah. I went through a very bad turn in the 80s when I listened to the Eagles a lot. That was I apologize for listening to the Eagles.
Yeah. Now why say that about the Eagles? I find them to be a wonderful addition to the American songbook.
Okay, I'm being a little bit facetious, but still, I mean, it's just I associate the Eagles with, okay, being in a bar, drinking too much. There are many substances available to you, and Hotel California, and okay, yeah. I never got into REO Speedwagon. Just for the record, I never did.
You didn't roll with the changes.
Didn't roll.
I got to see the Who. I mean, much later in their career. They They came around in 1996 or 1997 to what used to be called the Brendan Byrne Arena, right next to the Meadowlands, and they were doing Quadrophenia, and that was pretty cool because Billy Idol was one of the characters, so he was there, and Gary Glitter, who
I remember him,
who right after that got put away for I think something to do with children, which was unfortunate. But that was a great show. Now, Pete Townsend wasn't as loud as he had been, I'm sure, when you saw him. He's really struggling with hearing loss. He actually played acoustic guitar most of the night. His son played electric. But Daltrey sounded great. He sounded great.
Okay, so here's the strangest show I ever went to. This was in 1968. Okay, went with my big brother. Steve Paul's The Scene, somewhere in Manhattan, a very famous club, and the opening act was Tiny Tim, and the lead act was The Doors.
No
before
kidding.
They became just when the album came out, before Light My Fire hit it. That was, oh my God, what a show that was. That was fantastic.
That must have been, I mean, certainly memorable, but oh my God.
Yeah.
How do you go from Tiny Tim to Jim Morrison? I
know, I know, that's great. Yeah, it reminds me of this. I saw a show in upstate New York. It was that opening talent was Joni Mitchell, okay? And the lead was B.B. King. That didn't add up either. Both great.
Dude, fantastic. I saw B.B. King again later in his career. He came to Stamford, Connecticut, Palace Theater, and I took my older brother. My older brother and I went to go see him. It was one of the greatest nights of my life. It was such a great show. He sounded great. Put on such a show. His band was fantastic. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, we wasted a lot of times very profitably over the years.
Seeing a great show, I would never consider wasted time. My father, I used to go see Jimmy Buffett every single year whenever he'd come around, because it just to me.
My God. You have to in Florida, right? See Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, but this is in Connecticut too. I mean, this was, we would go and tailgate, and my father would be like, he plays the same songs every show. I'm like, it's not necessarily just about the music, it's about the scene, the setting, the escapism, the people watching was a big part of it, and just feeling like you're, I don't know, kind of escaping Connecticut, and you're on a different planet for a little bit.
But I don't see you as a parrot head. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm a closet parrot head, apparently. The new book I'm working on, which is deals with I lost my brother last summer, so it deals a little bit about the grief that comes from a big loss. Jimmy Buffett also died last summer.
Right.
And I had this thought. I'm like, I'm going to name every chapter after a Jimmy Buffett song.
Okay.
It's actually working out. I thought there's no force fits yet anyway. I'm only about halfway done, but we'll see if I keep that in as a choice or not. But I assume an editor will tell me what they think at some point.
Well, all great work is rooted in, I don't know, heartbreak, I think, finally.
Well, yeah. I mean, just think about all those kids you were talking about before, who are channeling their pain and their trauma into art. I think that's true. And whether it's writing fiction, nonfiction, poetry, comedy, a lot of it's rooted in heartbreak.
Oh, yeah. As Mark Twain said, there's no joy in heaven.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm curious. I know you've written a lot in your life. What's the strangest thing you've ever had to research for something that you were writing?
My life.
Okay.
When I was writing my first memoir, it was grueling. The subway to California. This is, I don't know when this was, 2010 or something. Yeah, it came out in 2012. And I was viscerally exhausted at the end of every day writing that book. Because a memoir is a different kind of beast from fiction or poetry for that matter. You're telling the truth. At that point, everybody in my family was gone. So I didn't have that as a concern. I don't know if I would have, certainly members of my family, my extended family, were certainly irritated by it. Certainly they lost, well, they're all Italian, so they get pissed off about everything. You got to say it just the right way. And it's okay, sorry. Well, you write a book. You write your own book and you can get it, set the record straight. So so in terms of research, after Subway to California, I don't know how this came up. Somehow doing a Google search about something, I came across, this is probably the most research I ever did with my work. I came across these trial transcripts of my father in New York State Superior Court, where he was I think we talked about this last time, he was a bookmaker and a small-time mobster, and that's how we got to California, because he was on the run, because the FBI was after him. And I see these transcripts and it was fascinating to see the old man being himself as he's facing all these legal consequences. He's actually being himself. So I reproduced some of the transcripts in Pope of Brooklyn. That was his street name, Pope, otherwise known as Popey, because he went to church one time, I think, with his crew. They saw him, so he got labeled with that. So that was a surprising development, and I didn't have that information when I wrote Subway to California, the first memoir. I didn't know, why the hell did we ever go to California? What was this about? And my father always answered every question. What are you, writing a book? I'm not going to answer any questions, It's all maximum deniability. So with this, I had all this information. Now I understood that he was in cahoots with all these dirty cops, and he was playing both sides against the middle to save his own bacon. And the cops were no heroes. Let's get that really straight. This was the Serpico age, and the cops were shaking down gamblers and bookmakers, and he was sort of playing the middle. So God bless him. He figured out something. And if I step way back, I can say, well, what happens? His parents are first generation Americans from southern Italy, outside Naples, small town called Fontana Rossa. No education. Nobody in my family graduated from high school. So what happens in America when you're first generation? Well, you either go into the mob or you go into the church. My dad chose one path, and then I left it up to me to go into the church, which is how I got heavily involved in the church, became a Christian brother for a while. And then the next generation of immigrants, well, they go into money. So my son is an investment banker. So of course, he learned the limits of, okay, all this artistic stuff and crime stuff I'm not interested in. And the artistic stuff I admire, but I'm not interested in. I'm going to do something else. Yeah, I feel like I'm in my head. I don't feel I've ever left Brooklyn, and sometimes I feel like I never left Ellis Island. I feel like my story is still being told from there.
Right. I think.
Oh, yeah. So that's research. Yeah.
I think it's always good to have a priest and an investment banker in the family, because they'll both take care of you, but in different ways.
We don't have a doctor. That's hopefully one of my grandkids will become an MD. That's my plan.
And then a lawyer too. You might, because you never, you never know when you need one of those. And then, like, the best piece of writing advice, either that you've ever received or that you could give somebody. What would you say?
Well, a couple of things I would say. Well, one is leave it all on the field. Just, and I actually say this to my students, who's out, just give it up. Just don't hold anything back. Just let it rip. There's a TV illusion right there, The Bear. Did you see that show? That is a great show.
I watched much of it. My wife saw it all. I had to skip some of the parts because we started watching it right after my brother had passed away, and it deals with his brother. Not to spoiler alert. I think you learned in the first episode, but his brother was no longer with them, and that hit a little too close to home. But it was
season one. Season 1 is really good. Season 2 is off the charts.
Yeah.
It is so much better. So yeah, leave it all. Let it rip. The other thing is, I was reading something about what Steve Jobs said. He wanted Apple to be the world's biggest startup. Okay. Apple is the biggest startup. Okay, there's something here. And I think about this with New Literary Project. I hope we never stop being a startup. What that means is you want to bring the energy, you want to take the risks, you want to leave it all on the field, and you're going to make mistakes, but be a startup. And that goes to, I get questions oftentimes as well. So you've been a writer, you've been a teacher, you've done all this nonprofit stuff, you run restaurants, you played cards for a living, you do all this kind of stuff. How does this all connect? And I would say, I don't know, but I know I'm a startup. And every time I'm just going to start it up. Because the curious thing, and you know this, every writer knows this, I think, finally. So you wrote a good poem or you wrote a novel that you feel good about, or a memoir or whatever. It doesn't help you the next time. You got to start all over again. Mm-hmm. It's this page right now is new. And yes, I may have some track record, but that doesn't help me write the next sentence. And it doesn't give me an idea. It doesn't fire my imagination to have done it. So that kind of spirit is, be a startup. Take risks. And go big. Go big.
And if you could,
don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail.
Well, that was common. In startup culture, in some organizations actually live up to it too. They don't just say it. Some paid lip service to it, but it's, hey, fail fast, but learn from it and get back up. Which is that's the trick, right? What can you learn from your failures to get something out of them?
Well, I know Frank McCourt, such a great writer, great athlete, by the way. People may not know this about Frank McCourt, Angela's Ashes. Tremendous athlete. And he said at one point, I learned nothing from success. Nothing. I learned everything from failure. Now he's Irish, so that explains a lot too, right there. Irish and the Italians were united. I don't know. The Irish invented talking, and the Italians invented never shutting up, as far as I know. So,
well, it is true though. If I think about, there's this, I think this misnomer we might have, which is, hey, we want to avoid all pain in life, or we want to avoid failure or looking bad. But if you think about it, the way you really learn, the way you really grow in life is to fail, is through pain. It is through suffering. I think about, like I mentioned being a runner before. If I just do the same run every single day, at some point it's going to become easy. And if I don't do a speed workout or push myself to go longer than I ever have or faster than I have, then I'm not going to get any better. But it's through that pain, through that muscle breakdown, and weightlifters say this too, that where you grow. And I think the same is true outside of sports. It's true in life. You take that risk, you fail, you get back up, and you don't let it get you down.
Well, and if I tie this back to myself, it would be when I started publishing poems when I was in college, and I thought, well, that's it. I'm a poet. Why would I ever, dirty my hands writing a story? That's ridiculous. And then I hit the skids for 20 years and made a lot of mistakes and had a lot of issues that I had to deal with, substance abuse and so forth, and lots of distractions. And then when I got back, to myself, I realized, okay, I'm going to try everything. And I started writing. I wrote a novel. I never thought I would write a novel. It's a pretty good novel. Then I wrote another book of poems, and then I wrote a memoir, and wrote some books of nonfiction, stuff I would have never thought to have ever tried. And what's the payoff? I don't know. It's you write what you have to do. You have to be your own fool, I guess. And I've succeeded at that. I can say that, being my own fool.
Well, you just gave me the title for our episode. Be your own fool. I can't think of a better one than that. I know you were giving some words of advice to other authors before, but I'm curious if you could whisper some words of advice into your younger self's ear. What would you tell the younger Joe?
Well, I would have to use a scatological term that maybe doesn't translate on your airwaves, but it's something my old man said to me as he was running away one day from the cops and leaving us on the road in Long Island. He said, "Go back to Grandma's house and don't take no blank from anybody."
Well, that brings
and I followed that. Yeah.
Well, it brings us full circle because that's how this conversation started with that story. So,
I forgot. Sorry.
Oh, I know. Well, to the magic of editing, we'll make sure that it's all very cohesive.
Editing is everything, isn't it? It's astonishing.
It's true. It's true. But
you read a book sometimes and say, this writer was failed by an editor. This editor did not do a job with this writer.
That has happened. That has happened.
Yes.
Although I'm sure people say that about my work. So,
I'm sure they do. I'm still looking forward to reading your works about the church and I got to get the mob in there too. You have the mob in your books.
There is
the mob in your church.
There is a little mob in Slippery People has a little mob in it. Actually, no, it's Motel California. Motel California has a little.
There's the Eagles thing going on. All right, now I get it. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of music in that one. But thank you for letting me plug my own work. I like how that was very slick. I always like to end with a reflective question. So I'm curious, Joe, if you could go back in time and whisper something into the younger Joe's ear. Maybe it's that 10-year-old boy walking to his grandparents' farm in Long Island that is surrounded by police cars. What would you tell your younger self? What kind of words of advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I have a little story here about that very thing. So I remember on my very young self, I was 16 years old, I was a senior in high school, and my favorite teacher of all time, I gave him some poems. And he's a great teacher. I taught a long time. I know a lot of teachers. He's still right there at the very top. I gave him some poems. And I met with him and he said, "What makes you think these are poems?" And I felt so horrible for him that he didn't see the genius of my poetry. So I took my own lesson. I said, be your own fool. Be your own fool. Yeah. You got to be a little bit crazy to think that your writing matters. And it does. And if you believe in it and work hard enough at it, maybe it will. So I learned that lesson. So that would be, I would say, follow that guy.
Follow that guy. Be your own fool. I love it. But as always, Joe, this was fun. And I'm going to say thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Really appreciate this, Mike. You're a terrific companion in this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.